Similar to Ruth, CARA, the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate, where I worked for 21 years, does a lot of social science research. It's surveys, it's focus groups, it's interviews, it's online surveys, it's national polls. We've had 55 years worth of research on the church in the United States. Unlike Ruth, we focus on Catholics. We do a lot of collaborative work. We cooperated with the and assisted with the Congregational Life Survey that was done in the US in 2010 and do other collaborations, but we focus our research on the Catholic Church in the US. And what I'm going to do here is give you more the results of the research, what we're finding in the Catholic Church in the US. I don't need to go into the methods particularly because we do very similar to what Ruth described. Mostly for Catholic parishes, we'll do individual parish surveys where people sit in the pews, as Ruth described, and complete their survey. But we also do national level polling of people in the pews and people outside of the pews, people that identify as Catholic, whether they ever darken the door of a church. So we've got a broad spectrum of research to show you, and I just want to hit on a few of the highlights, talk about some of the trends in the Catholic Church in the US from 30,000 feet. If you were a bird looking down on the US nationally, this is kind of what you would see. So what we see in the US over time is that the Catholics have kept up with the overall US population. Still somewhere between a fifth and a quarter of the US population is Catholic. But the Catholics no longer live in the traditionally Catholic areas of the previous century. When Catholics first came to the US in the 19th century and early 20th century, they came where the jobs were and settled typically in the Northeast and in the upper Midwest of the country. The picture looks very different now. Another major change over time is that we see that we have fewer priests. We also, as I said, have more Catholics. That means that we have bigger parishes and many innovations in leadership. These are some of the things I'm going to show you. So looking just at 10 years from 2000 to 2010, you can see very clearly what we describe as a portrait of two churches in the US. The traditional centers of immigrant Catholicism in the Northeast and in the upper Midwest, those are the spots in orange and red on this map, where you see parishes are closing. There's fewer Catholics there than there were. People are moving out. The Catholic population is shifting from the Northeast and the Midwest to the South and to the West. There's pretty much an equal distribution now of Catholics throughout the 4 regions of the country, but there's not an equal distribution infrastructure. So there's many, many more parishes where Catholics used to be in the Northeast and the Midwest. There's far fewer parishes in the South and in the West where Catholics now live. And so it's been a big mismatch. Catholic parishes have been closing, Catholic schools have been closing. If you look in any of the major cities in the Northeast, it looks like a church in decline. It looks like the church is dying. And that's a lot of the press that you've been reading. But if you look in the South and in the West, particularly in the major cities and in the suburbs around the major cities, in Dallas and Atlanta and Charlotte, North Carolina, and Los Angeles, you see a church that can't keep up with the growth that there's so many people that they have major parking wars trying to get in and get out, to get the different masses, to get the people switching from the 10:30 mass has to leave the same time the 11:30 mass is trying to come in. So the states here in green and dark green, those are places that have added new parishes just in that 10-year period. The newer parishes that are being built, however, are much, much larger than the parishes that are closing in the Northeast and in the Midwest. So what it ends up with is we have in the US fewer parishes, in fact, fewer parishes than we had in 1960, even though we have much, much larger parishes with more masses. So the average number of households per parish in 2000 was a little under 1,000. By 2010, just 10 years later, the average number of households per parish was almost 1,200. Much, much larger parishes. And that's largely driven by the fact that there's fewer priests. The numbers of ordinations just has not been able to keep up with the numbers of priests who are retiring or dying or leaving. If you look at the slide on the left here, you'll notice that even since the mid-70s, the number of ordinations has not kept up with the numbers of priests that have been retiring or dying. So we've been in a net loss situation here for 50 years, and it's not getting better. So what that results in is that the number of US diocesan priests who are active in parish ministry is down to a ratio of less than one priest per parish, less than one active diocesan priest per parish. That causes some issues. And one of the big issues is, okay, what do you do if you're not going to close a parish? How do you keep parishes open when you don't have enough priests to lead them? So what we have now in the US is more than a quarter of all parishes are in a situation of some sort of multi-parish ministry. That means the priest has responsibility for more than one parish. Oftentimes they say it's a twinned parish or a yoked parish. It could be as many as 5 or 7 parishes together with 2 or 3 priests to cover those parishes. So more than a quarter of all parishes are multi-parish ministry. Almost 1/10 of parishes are now some sort of consolidated parish, which means 2 or more parishes merged. They closed their territorial boundaries, or closed the parish and merged the territorial boundaries into a larger geographic area. It's a consolidated parish. They may still worship in 3 or 4 worship sites, but they all are considered canonically one parish. The final type of leadership administration that has been experimented with some in the US is that of having a parish life coordinator. This is a Canon 217.3 type of situation where in the absence of a priest, the bishop may appoint a deacon or some other layperson to have the pastoral responsibility for the operation of the parish. There's still a priest who comes in to say mass, but the day-to-day operation is handled by a deacon or a religious sister or brother or layperson. This model was tried in many parishes for a while, but bishops don't seem to be real strongly in favor of that. Another result of not having enough priests to go around is sort of an interesting Vatican II byproduct of that, I guess you could say, is that we have seen tremendous growth in the number of permanent deacons and lay ecclesial ministers who are sharing the burden of parish life. They're doing many of the non-sacramental ministries that formerly were the responsibility of a priest, an associate priest, a parochial vicar. There's close to 40,000 lay ecclesial ministers in the US now serving in parishes as religious education coordinators, as liturgists, as all youth ministers, you name it, all sorts of responsibilities like that. And the permanent diaconate has taken off in the US. I think 40% of all permanent deacons around the world are in the United States. It's just one of those things that, again, an outgrowth of Vatican II that hit a nerve in the US, and they've really helped to spread out some of the burden of not having enough priests. So some of the implications that we have learned from studying the church here at 30,000 feet is that parish life has changed dramatically. It's going to continue to change dramatically in response to these different circumstances and the challenges they bring about. Another thing that we've learned from this research is that among these new models of pastoral leadership, it seems that parishioners are much more comfortable sharing a pastor or even having a parish life coordinator than they are with merging or closing their parish. They say, we will make the sacrifice. We will be happy to share our pastor with someone else. Just don't close the parish. They have a very, very strong connection, emotional connection to the place, to the building. And that's something that's very, very hard to deal with when you're as looking at it from a bishop's position, trying to distribute resources equitably and still trying to keep alive a parish building that maybe has a leaking roof or can no longer be heated in the wintertime. So it's tough to close a parish, but sometimes that's a necessary reality. Another thing that bigger parishes and sharing parishes is resulting in is that the neighborhood parish that we've been familiar with in the US is being transformed more into a regional parish, a community parish. It's a place that relies on collaboration. So clergy rely on lay people and vowed religious to help out, to work together, to make a parish that has an impact on the neighborhood. Another major change that we've seen over the trends of the last 20, 25 years, again, reflects what Ruth said about Australia. The Catholic Church in the US is the most diverse church in terms of ethnicity and culture than any other church. There's now close to 40% of all Catholic churches serve some other particular ethnic, cultural, or linguistic community. They have a Hispanic ministry. They have a Vietnamese population. They have a Bengali congregation. They speak many, many different languages at Mass. Over 6,000 parishes have an ethnic ministry. And in large part, this is driven by the fact that so many Catholics are immigrant Catholics. A quarter of all adult Catholics in the US are foreign born. They come from Latin America, they come from Africa, Haiti, Asia, Vietnam, Philippines, all over the world, primarily the Catholic centers around the world have been sending to the US. So a quarter of all adult Catholics now are foreign born. But again, this is not equally distributed. And you can see here again very clearly the tale of two churches that I was speaking of earlier. If you look at the bars for the Northeast and the Midwest, you see that the overwhelming population of parishioners in the pews is still mostly white. The other races, ethnicities are much more likely to be found where the population is growing more rapidly in the South and in the West. And these are where the culturally and ethnically diverse parishes are to be found. These very large, very diverse parishes. When we surveyed parishioners in pews and asked them about cultural diversity, this is from a survey of over 60,000 parishioners in pews, on paper, the good old-fashioned survey. We asked them a lot of questions about parish life and parish vitality, and these two questions about ethnic diversity, I think, are very, very telling. The bar in green is the percent that agree strongly that their parish should be more involved in celebrating cultural diversity. You see that the foreign-born, both African or Hispanic, Latino, Vietnamese, are much more likely to strongly agree that their parish should be more involved in celebrating cultural diversity. The second question is, I'd like to see more diversity in the parish. And again, the same thing. These foreign-born or ethnic, culturally diverse populations are much more likely to agree strongly with these sentiments than are the non-Hispanic white parishioners down at the bottom. About a fifth of them strongly agree with both of these statements. This is a source of friction in parishes, in parish life. Celebrating diversity or accommodating the diversity that exists within our community. That's a challenge. But we see.
May
yes.
I ask you to come to an end?
Yes, almost to the last slide. What we see overwhelmingly is that parishes across all ethnicities, across all cultures, the things that parishioners say attract them to their parish is its open, welcoming spirit, the quality of the liturgy and preaching, and the sense of belonging that they feel in the parish. That's what brings them to the parish. And our other final major source of concern is that in terms of sacraments, we see a decline in adult participation. A quarter of baptisms are down by 25%. Confirmations are down by 20%. This is just between 2005 and 2015, in 10-year period. 40% decline in RCIA, adult entries into the faith. These are major concerns for the church in the US because these are the touchstones. These are the points in time when people who may have been away from the faith are likely to reconnect with the church. So just in closing, these are the trends that we're seeing and keeping an eye on. Declining numbers of ordinations, migration, growth in population that's fueled by immigration, continued impact of Vatican II, and declining participation in the sacraments. Thank you.